Hello everyone, I'm Nick, this is Alasdair. We're here to do a review for the Canadian Highlander format of the new set Eldritch Moon.
Here we have the first of the cards with the new meld mechanic. We don't really care about the meld mechanic in this case. The melding's not why we're interested in this card.
No, it's an efficient beats deck. It's 4 mana, 4 power with evasion, and it's got lifelink, so we're already racing other creature decks. But unfortunately, that's all it is, basically. The first strike isn't going to come up very often. And when you're paying 4 mana in a white deck, you're expecting a lot more power than 4 most of the time.
Yeah.
So this is a very competitive slot, unfortunately.
Yeah, there's probably better options for this one, but if you really want another Angel. Also, if you just feel like running a Highlander Angel deck, you can put Bruna in here as well and
Sure.
get all kinds of value.
Yeah, but as it is, I don't know if it fits into any deck. Soul Spirit, on the other hand, is once again square stats, 2 power for 2 mana with evasion.
And then also just a very solid anti-wrath ability.
Yeah, very
Here,
important
Whisperwood
ability.
Elemental is good.
Yeah, this is Whisperwood Elemental that you'd be playing anyway, as a solid creature. And also, it's got a relevant creature type. More and more wizards are printing spirit effects. So, jam this right into your white aggressive decks. This is just a very, very solid card.
Speaking of very, very, very solid cards, Thalia, probably one of the best cards in the set.
The last Thalia, we all remember. Everyone who likes to cast spells for a living still wakes up in a cold sweat at night just at the thought of her name. And here once again we've got a.
This Thalia actually taxes you almost the same as the previous one. She doesn't add mana, but she makes your lands come into play tapped. So she taxes you at just about the same rate. And then she's also an, what's that card, Imposing Sovereign? If
right.
creatures come into play tapped. This Thalia can actually make, if you have to cast a blocker like a Thragtusk to stay alive, she can actually make it take 2 additional turns.
She has a weird effect of making creatures actually significantly worse in this format, which is weird. That hasn't happened in a long time. Creatures have just been getting better and better. But now, as a control player, I'd rather have an instant or sorcery to deal with the threats than drop a blocker.
And that's absolutely what the deck that's playing her wants.
Yeah.
So this bears a lot of similarities to Song of the Dryads, which has been
right.
off and on playable in Highlander, kind of a 100th card. Some green removal. Blue is the other color that doesn't tend to have a lot of actual solid, hard, permanent removal. So.
Yeah, if you're finding yourself in a blue deck that doesn't have access to Vindicate, then this is a super, super useful answer to pull out. Blue-white control doesn't need it, but who knows what weird thing you're brewing up. This is basically a Vindicate in a lot of scenarios.
Yeah, it doesn't hit artifacts or enchantments,
sure.
Which is...
It's relevant. It's relevant.
There's a lot of... It's really nice for your removal to incidentally be able to hit those in this format, because you never know when an important one might show up.
But fortunately, when you're playing a very, very heavy blue deck, which is the only scenario where you don't have access to any Vindicate effects, you're often countering spells with an eye towards, well, this is the thing that I can't deal with any other way. And so you're just going to be shifting to, instead of always countering the creatures, you can always counter the artifacts and enchantments because you've got Imprison on you.
Yep.
So here we have another powerful spirit. I think it's powerful anyway. Look at this. 4 mana for a 3/3 flying, and then you're constantly tapping down their blockers once again, right?
Yeah. This gives quite a lot of adds quite a lot of value to your instants and sorceries.
Only problem is 4 mana creature. We've been over this. What deck wants to play 4 mana creatures? Control decks want a win condition that's a complete trump all, super powerful blocker, and
this is at its statistically this is at its best in the counterburn low curve, lots of cheap spells decks that only want to be playing a few creatures that either cost 2 mana or kill you immediately. And this doesn't do either of those things.
This is great on the attack and on the defense, but it's not great in any deck, unfortunately, I think.
Yeah.
Scour the Lab. This is basically Jace's Ingenuity for 6 mana, or for 4 mana.
And everyone knows how you feel about Jace's Ingenuity.
Well, it's just one step down from Tidings. Another way you could think about it is an opportunity that always draws one less card. That's unfortunate, but
Sometimes it costs 2 less mana.
that's a big deal. So
yeah, casting this card without Delirium. If you don't think you can regularly get to Delirium, don't put this card in your deck.
Just look through your deck and look at how many. If you've got a couple creatures, a couple planeswalkers, then you're probably getting an instant sorcery and land in there too.
Yeah. Some people play Judges Familiar.
Some people play Spirits. I've been talking about the Spirits.
Yeah, this is nice in that it fits 2 different roles. If you have a Judges Familiar in your deck, you can just play this as another 1/1 flyer that slows down their wraths.
Mm-hmm.
If you have other spirits in your deck, you can play this as a spirit, that is sometimes a 2/2 or a 3/3 that gets in there. But with this card, you don't have to pick. You get to have both.
Definitely it goes in every deck that's already playing Flying Men. But there's a few decks that would play Flying Men if only it just had a little bit more going for it, and this is significantly better.
So going back to those blue-red lots and cheap instants and sorceries decks,
Right.
The front side of this card's not terribly exciting. You don't really care about having a 2-mana mana dork. But the flip side of this card is pretty exciting. 3/4 prowess makes everything cheaper.
Yeah, and it's probably going to be pretty easy to flip this.
I mean, it's obviously fairly vulnerable for a turn that you cast it, but a lot of those decks are running creatures that are young pyromancers. Gutter Snipe are not resilient creatures; they're just cheap. And if they die right away, well, then you play another. They don't die right away because you cast them on 4 mana when you have a counterspell up.
Yeah, I think this slots pretty nicely into the blue-red instant deck plan.
Yeah.
Give it a shot. There's been a lot of hubbub about Unsubstantiate, a lot of comparing it to a remand that can also bounce a creature.
Man, can you imagine if this was a remand that also bounced a creature?
Unfortunately, it's definitely not a remand that can also bounce a creature, and don't think for 1 second that it is.
It's kind of like Disperse with Upside.
All of the 2-mana bounce spells that I play either draw me a card in some scenario, or bounce all your stuff for 7 mana. This has no chance to ever draw a card. Be completely certain about that. I guarantee you. It doesn't say that anywhere in its text box, ever. And that is basically the only criterion for a bounce spell.
I think we can all agree this does several things that we all like, but it only ever does one of them.
And does all of them poorly.
It does them all fine, but it only ever does one of them. We really like it when spells do 2 of them.
Yeah, I think so. Unsubstantiate is very flexible, but it's not very powerful.
Now, I find this a very interesting card. Not much of an effect that we've seen before.
Well, we've seen 2-mana 1/1 gets in there and loots.
Yep, people play Infiltrator Ilkor.
Mm-hmm. And this goes in those same decks.
Skulk isn't quite as good as Shadow,
Not
but
quite as good.
It's still pretty good.
It's about as good.
There's a lot of creatures that can't block a 1/1 Skulk.
It's true.
But then the upside you get from hitting someone with this thing versus Infiltrator Ilkor.
Yeah. If you're not doing anything with the 2-mana anyway, even if your game plan is to reanimate something enormous, you're still happy to get a 3/2 creature for 2 mana and no card disadvantage.
This is an Infiltrator Ilkor that can actually force your opponent to Wrath.
Yeah, no, that happens quickly. And this is an Infiltrator Ilkor that single-handedly locks down the board against an aggro deck.
Yeah.
They don't have a 1-power creature. You're often making a 3/2 every single turn in your Reanimator deck. Meanwhile, setting up the reanimation. It's the double threat.
And it's so comparable to Infiltrator Ilkor that I think that it's totally valid to play this in a deck, even if that deck doesn't have that many creatures. Because even if you're not discarding a creature card to it, it's still fine.
Yeah, don't be tricked by the third ability down there, feeling like you need to get off that ability.
You can just loot every turn.
It's playable just as that. Yeah, watch out for this one. So, zombies. You like zombies.
Well,
What do you think of
I'm
zombies?
okay about zombies. There are some people out there who really like zombies. There's a lot of interesting tribal effects in this set, and the zombies deck has like 3 new specifically tribal cards. All of which I think are probably not quite good enough to just slap in any old black deck.
Yeah.
But this one I think is very interesting. Obviously, a lot of these really low curve black decks like having something they can do with their 3rd or their 4th land that they drew in the
Yep.
scenarios where they drew it. Or, they're bloodgassed, or those decks have a lot of things that can end up in their graveyards anyway. So being able to churn out 2/2s is a slightly slower but nice, longer game plan. Plus, the ability to turn excess zombies into cards seems pretty good. All on a 1-drop. I mean, if this card was more expensive, I think you'd be paying too much for what you get, but...
No, this is very much got too many cards, now you got zombies. Got too many zombies, now you got cards. This is going to even out your black aggro deck quite a bit. It's worth testing for sure.
Yeah,
Very interesting.
And even if it ends up being too slow for a really fast black aggro deck that doesn't have enough zombies to consistently just use it, I could definitely see it being in a slightly more mid-rangey deck that does want to be getting to 4 or 5 mana for some things, but can find itself with excess cards that it doesn't know what to do with.
Absolutely. We got the Planeswalker.
So I find the most fascinating comparison with Liliana with the flip side of Jace, Jace Telepath Unbound.
Ah,
They're
yeah.
very similar in effect. Liliana's plus gives the creature -1 power or -1 toughness, which is obviously better. Her minus mills 2 cards first, which is better. Is a -2 instead of -3, which is better. Gets back a creature rather than a spell, which is
Depends
comparable.
on your deck. Yeah, sure.
So in all regards, she's kind of like a better Jace Telepath Unbound that costs 3 mana instead of 2.
I think it's important to note here that for 3-mana Planeswalkers, often the comparison is to other Planeswalkers, which most of them are 4 and 5 mana. This is only 3 mana. That is really cheap for the ability you're getting. If you have a 2/2 blocker already, giving their threat -2/-1 means they have no good attacks. Absolutely not.
And I feel like people will be very tempted to compare her to Liliana of the Veil, which is already recognized as one of the most powerful Planeswalkers in the game.
It's one of the most powerful cards in the game. Don't compare it to Liliana of the Veil. Don't compare it to 4-mana Planeswalkers. Compare it to other 3-mana cards in your deck, and you'll quickly see that Liliana the Last Hope has 2 abilities that are both on their own amazing. Leave a Planeswalker behind afterwards. Good in a drawn-out game, good in a tight spot, good as a quick fix removal spell.
And as someone who's cast a lot of Liliana's of the Veil, the one area where Liliana struggles is her Liliana of the Veil's minus can take out any threat. But if your opponent has 2 small creatures, she ends up not really doing anything. You tick her up and then she dies, or you tick her down and kill her Birds of Paradise and then she dies.
Yeah.
This Liliana, while not as good against a Primeval Titan or a Marit Lage, can hold her own against a more mixed board a lot better.
Absolutely, and in a high variance format like Highlander, that's really important.
Yeah.
Play this card.
Now, honestly, I'd be willing to say that I think this is probably the best of the Oaths.
Oh, yeah. No question there. Absolutely.
And it actually does something that a deck with a lot of Planeswalkers wants. It makes creatures that protect your Planeswalkers.
Completely.
3 mana for an Edict is almost playable. We've got a lot of, in the format, like 2 mana Edicts or 3 mana Edicts with upside. This is a 3 mana Edict with upside. If your deck doesn't have a lot of Planeswalkers, there are better Edicts. But if your deck has 8-12 Planeswalkers in it, especially if they're not green Planeswalkers, which are already good at defending themselves, this does a really good job of keeping your white, your blue, your black, your red Planeswalkers around.
In your Esper control, in your Grixis control, look at your Planeswalker count and seriously consider just jamming this in there.
Yeah, cut a slightly better removal spell, and then you
Yeah.
get a. I mean, obviously not as good, but putting this in the same space as Liliana the Veil, they're both 3-mana edicts that come with some upside, and
Just
they play
getting-
very nicely together.
Just getting 1/2/2 out of this makes it more than worth it, I think.
There's a lot of cards for this blue-red cast
Yeah.
lots of spells deck.
Yeah. Now, is this ever going to get really cheap enough? Because I don't think this is playable unless it's 3 mana.
Fair enough.
How often are we going to have 5 instances of sorceries in our graveyard?
Right away, probably not.
Sure,
As someone
sure.
who has actually, if you recall, once or twice played a counterburn deck, getting up to 6 instants and sorceries in the graveyard, not really that difficult. That deck's plan is cast an instant or sorcery every turn.
Right. So this is in some ways comparing to Treasure Cruise.
Yeah.
Can I just toss that out there? I'm not saying it's Treasure Cruise, but I'm saying you get to 6 instances in your graveyard faster than you think, and it's 2 red mana for. Oh, I see right here. Draw 3 cards. Those are the only words I can read right now. So that's very exciting. It's also a threat.
One suggestion: if you are playing this on Treasure Cruise, consider casting this first.
Just a little. That's a freebie from us. It's just that's a freebie. So we've got an escalating burn spell over here for 3 mana. It's
3 damage to an opponent,
or 4 to a creature. So we're in like a bad roast territory, or bad skull cracked kind of territory. But the fact that it's either, that's actually, I guess you could say it's more of a bad char territory.
Yeah, I mean, we have
bad char territory, but for 4 mana, it does both.
I'm still a little skeptical that this card might be good enough to see play in the burn damage heavy decks that want it, because.
But what about Big Red? That's a thing now. Matthew Greer has proven that Big Red is completely competitive in this format. I don't know how that deck works.
I don't know that deck wants
I don't know.
bolt their opponent or drop 4 damage on a single creature.
It is bolting their opponents, though. That deck is often winning with, I'm slowly collecting card advantage, I'm controlling your board, and then, oh yeah, I've been saving up cards. Didn't you realize I've got 12 points of burn in my hand?
Sure, but the way that strategy works is every instance of 3 damage costs you 1 or 2 mana, not 4 mana.
Sure.
I don't know.
I think this card will find a place, whether in Big Red or in Grixis Control.
I'm a little bit more skeptical, but we'll see.
So, speaking of Big Red, those decks are playing, like, rummaging effects, right?
Certainly, I have seen some of the rummage effects that Red has access to in the and be it faster Red or Big Red. Wild guess.
Well, this is more fuel for the fire, I guess you'd say.
Faithless looting. And yeah, this seems in any situation where you have a red card that lets you discard a land and draw 2 cards.
Mm-hmm.
This is that, but you get to pick the 2 cards.
Yeah, those 2 cards have no risk of one of them being a land, which often is the case.
Now, I'm not sure whether the best case scenario for this card is you're getting back a lightning bolt and a chain lightning, or you're getting back a wildfire and
Sure.
I don't know what.
Your mileage may vary. Look at your deck.
But there's possibilities.
Yeah, definitely possibilities.
Red really is getting into this card drawing game these days.
Yeah, it's true. Now, last time we had a 3 mana 3/2 that maybe was going to draw some cards at some point.
Well, Matthew Greer plays it in his Big Red.
Really? Okay. Well, yeah, I guess so. I mean, we were skeptical.
Well, because the Sin Prodder doesn't draw you cards. It punches your opponent in the face.
Exactly.
If you're revealing 6 drops...
Don't count on it drawing a card. This actually does draw a card.
Yeah.
I mean, in a scenario where you're attacking and they have more than 3 toughness that they're blocking, why did you attack? If you're ever playing a 3 mana 3/2, and it's actually doing something useful, it's actually attacking for some sort of usefulness, you're drawing a card. 3 mana 3/2 that replaces itself?
Yeah, I
That's
mean,
really reasonable.
people are probably going to criticize this card for not being able to consistently draw you a card every turn. But, I mean, I don't think we...
Just drawing one card is plenty.
We don't need this to be Dark Confidant.
Yeah, exactly. That bar is too high. It's a reasonable creature if you're willing to pay 3 mana for a creature.
And it's also a vampire with madness, which is a tribal theme that they're... it's all the tentacles, which is a tribal theme that they're really pushing in this block. So it may be, even if it's not good enough in a regular red deck, if someone puts together a black-red vampires tribal, something that if your deck can benefit from discarding a card, then this gets even better.
Yeah, give it a shot. So here we have a land that taps for colorless. I mean, yeah, it's a red card. We're calling it that. And there's very little disincentive to putting this in your deck. It's a land that comes into play untapped, but it gives your creatures haste. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
I mean, it's no teetering peaks, but once again, that's a high bar, and this is just replacing a mountain in many decks.
Yeah. It's very optional. Do you want to pay an extra 2 mana to give your creature haste?
Yeah, in the late game, you're top decking a creature every once in a while. All your creatures gain haste, basically, is what this says.
Yeah.
In the late game.
Yeah. I don't know which of the red decks benefits from that the most, because I know some of the more mid-rangey ones, their 4-drops and 5-drops all have haste anyway.
Right.
But... I don't know.
You're still drawing 2-drops in the late game.
Goblins players.
Yeah, give this a
look. Give all your 1-drops haste when you hit 4 mana.
Sure. So into green, this has emerge. When you cast it, it's trying to be Craterhoof Behemoth.
So it's obviously not Craterhoof. You can't natural order this up for multiple reasons.
Yeah.
You can't and don't want to.
Yes.
But I wonder about just being able to cast this card fairly in Elf Ball.
Right.
Because they don't almost have to cast natural order. They just tap 8 mana for Craterhoof. This says 9 mana on it, but you're actually sacrificing a Wood Elves.
Well, you're sacrificing a creature that's tapping to pay mana oftentimes and wouldn't be attacking that turn anyway.
Yeah, and if you sacrifice a Wood Elves, this is 6 mana, 7/7 haste that does a reasonable Craterhoof. I mean, when they cast Craterhoof, you take 50, but you don't die. It doesn't take 50 damage to kill you.
Yeah, this has only got to deal 20, and this may only be capable of dealing 20, but that's enough.
Huh.
And it adds redundancy to a tier 1 Highlander deck, and I don't see why you turn that down.
Especially an effect that's as unique as Craterhoof. I don't see why that deck wouldn't want a second. Maybe it doesn't want the 5th copy, but I don't see why it wouldn't want to try the second. Do you play green creatures?
Well,
do you like attacking with your green creatures?
I suppose.
Do you like your green 1-drops to have 2 power? Do we have a werewolf horror for you? We didn't even bother including the backside of this thing because it
gets big. You've got lots of mana lying around late game with your green aggressive deck.
Don't fall into the classic too many words trap. It's a 1 mana 2 power creature.
And often it just gives you something to do with all that extra mana. Yeah. Oof. So, what does this do? It
lets you sacrifice your giant Eldrazi boar to go and get Craterhoof.
The annoying thing about having all those creatures around, what do you do with them? You gotta do something with them. You sacrifice them? I don't know what to do with creatures. No, but seriously, this goes in black, green, white creature combo decks, probably.
Yeah.
This
again, people are going to compare it to natural order. Don't compare it to natural order. It's not.
It's not going to be a pointed card. Well, I don't know. Let's not write it off. But it's not natural order level power. It's not survival of the fittest level power or birthing pod.
But it is a one-shot birthing pod. One-shot birthing pod's not as good as birthing pod.
But oftentimes you're winning the game the turn you're casting birthing pod. You only need to one-shot it.
Yeah.
So this slots right into every deck that has birthing pod that has access to green mana.
Absolutely.
And it does almost the same thing, if not better.
Yeah, and it's also nice that it doesn't have to get a green creature. It can get any creature.
Absolutely.
What is going on in this art?
Yeah, there's a albino snake, and it just happens to be hanging out near a skull.
Oh no, that's a whole skeleton.
Yeah, no, it was a hanged skeleton. It was a hanged person,
Oh.
and the snake just is appealing to the. It enjoys the idea that this person was hanged because it also likes to strangle people. Thematically, it makes sense, but clearly this skeleton was not killed by the snake. So,
And then it has reach.
uh, don't ask us, okay?
We heard you like Wild Mongrel, so here's another one.
Yeah, and dies to ghastly demise, but not if you dump your whole hand.
Now, I really like this because it's not so often that we see a card get printed that could actually just generate a new deck or
Yeah, I mean,
really affect.
when we say new deck, we mean there's a deck, but it hasn't posted a result ever.
Yeah.
This card is so significant for that deck that who knows? I mean,
I don't know how to evaluate this card.
let's get to tinkering.
Let's see what Surge does with it.
Call up Surge and say, dust off your life in the loam, Surge. What's going on here? Can we do a testing session on Cockatrice and figure this out? There might be something here. Back to Black-Red Vampires. We're in the gold section now. So what's going on with that deck? What does this do for that deck?
Well, 4 mana 4/4. It's not really there by itself. If this is just an on-curve creature, it's all right. 4 mana 4/4s, that's fine. It has Madness. So again, Madness before now hasn't really mattered that much. There haven't been that many relevant discard outlets, but there's a lot of cards in this set that are really pushing Madness and discard outlets and Vampire Tribal. There's all these jigsaw pieces that don't really work on their own, but if you throw enough of them on a table,
maybe, but we've had 3 mana 4/4s in the past that aren't playable. Ashenmoor Gouger. No one's considered that in a very, very long time in Highlander. And I like my cards to be playable just at their face value. I mean, what if you don't have Madness? Then we're paying 4 mana for a 4/4. That is way below the curve in any deck.
Well, I think that the deck that wants to be playing this is a super low curve red-black aggro deck. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's the Vampire deck that has a lot of discard outlets. Maybe it's not the Vampire deck. Maybe it's just a super low curve 1 and 2 drop red-black deck. I think if you top your curve out with this, if you actually cast Bloodhall Priest as your last card and get to shock something right away and then shock something again when you attack, it seems like it's clearing the way for your Alpha Strike for finishing the game pretty quickly. Maybe. I don't think that a shock every turn should be discounted.
I'm skeptical. We'll see. So this looks tempting right on the face of it. 2 mana for 2/2 trample. That's often a 4/4 in Highlander.
Yeah.
And is often doing some scrying.
Yeah, it basically has scry 3.
Yeah.
But the cards go in your graveyard, which is better than on the bottom of your deck.
Problem for me is, what deck are you putting this in? I don't see this going in a green-black Planeswalker control deck.
I feel like a deck like mine has difficulty pushing through a 2/2. It's not a deck that knows how to attack very well.
It's blocking with 2/2s
Yeah.
until it gets to its crazy Planeswalker synergy in the end game.
And if you are able to consistently get Delirium, being able to slap this down as a 4/4, I think that if you're consistently making this a 4/4, it being able to attack in a 4/4 trample is a lot easier to figure out how to hit your opponent with.
I think I can figure that out.
Yeah. So I would say you either need to be a green-black deck that just wants 2-drops. That just wants a 2/2 that attacks. Or you want to be a slower deck that can consistently hit Delirium without needing its own trigger.
But that deck is already so tight. I think if this is literally making the cut and not just looking like a nice option, it's got to be a green-black aggro deck.
Mm-hmm.
So dust off those old Golgari rares and see if you can build that deck. But I think it would be a new deck, basically. We haven't seen that post results yet, and so...
No, it's not really a deck that people put a lot of effort into trying to make competitive.
But maybe there is a deck there. It's a disruptive deck that's got a clock against combo.
Yep. slap this and a lot less troll down. And
Oh, that's troll. I missed that card. Yeah, give it a shot. So this doesn't look like an efficient creature on its own. 4 mana, 3/3 flash, lifelink, an ability that I've never heard of being relevant. What's the appeal of this card?
Well, and again, we've talked about all the new seeds for deck archetypes that haven't seen much effect yet. There were several zombie tribal cards in this set, several vampire tribal cards, and there's also a whole sub-theme of human tribal cards. And this is one of the first cards that we've seen that really actually has a relevant human tribal ability.
Sure.
Is there currently a human tribal deck? No, there isn't. But human's a card type that has been slapped on an awful lot of cards.
So you're thinking it might just be a green-white aggro deck that happens to have a million humans in it, and this creature is going to help that out a lot?
Potentially. I mean, what does that deck look like? Is this card good enough to be in that deck? I don't know. There's some other human tribal cards in this set as well. I just think that it's an interesting seed for deck builders to consider. The word humans on a lot of cards you own, and it's not really something that's ever mattered before.
I think it's a great jumping off point, something to think about. I suspect this gets cut pretty early in that deck, even if the deck is good. 4 mana, as we've discussed, is such a tight slot for creatures.
This is a plant skeleton that fits into the same category as same deck.
I don't feel like I necessarily need to read the Delirium ability. This is
don't worry about the Delirium ability.
If you're building a green-black aggro deck,
what's that?
Amazing. That's fantastic.
Drag Mangler.
Absolutely. Get right in there. This deck practically builds itself. Just type in Golgari into Gatherer and you've got it. No, the Delirium ability is also fantastic and not difficult to turn on in green-black because there's a million fantastic green-black planeswalkers and instant sorcery creature land is a given.
Yep.
So, yeah, I think Mornwilla goes right into that deck if that's a deck.
Yeah, a lot of these cards, if you're playing Jund aggro, Red adds so many more cards that...
It's such a tight deck already. I don't think there's room for any cards in there.
But if you want to try Jund without the red...
Hey. Queller. Now this is what I'm excited about in this set is the white-blue cards. There's one of them. It's a 3 mana 2/3 flash flying spirit. We've talked about spirits. I lied. No, it's not. It's a 3 mana counterspell that wins in a counter war and gives you card advantage. It's practically a dismiss because for 3 mana you're countering their counterspell and you've got a body just left over, just lying around. It's also a surprise blocker. We love surprise blockers in white control decks. Anything that is a flash flyer with a bigger butt than it has power is already just like an exciting include in the deck. And the ability keeps getting cut because it's got a high power, low toughness. It's the opposite of what I want. So Spell Queller is playing double duty. Both halves of it I'm already happy to be playing. The creature and the counter spell.
And as somebody who is never going to play this card, I would like to say that I think that it falls into the same category as the new Vector Fiction, which we didn't mention here because it's not calendar playable, but it's a really interesting card. And I love both of them for the vast number of really interesting gameplay scenarios that I can imagine. This, sitting across the table from a Spell Queller, suddenly makes me reevaluate when I want to use my instant speed removal. What spell is under Spell Queller? When can I most effectively just cast that at instant speed? I mean, you put an Obstinate Baloth under this thing, and now suddenly it's got Flash at some point. Or I'm going to be really excited the first time that Spell Queller absorbs a counterspell, and then later on your opponent responds to your next spell by casting Go for the Throat on Spell Queller.
It's just it's going to be fascinating to play against, and I'm glad that they pushed it to a power level where it's playable.
I really wish that they'd pushed the new Factor Fiction a little bit more, because I would love to see that card get cast as well.
Yeah, but as it is, we've got this gem, and this goes into control decks and in Nevo decks, I think.
Yeah.
Tamiyo has picked up the books.
3 3-color planeswalkers. How many 3-color planeswalkers do we see playing Highlander? I mean, there aren't very many.
How many? Yeah, there's a Jund one that doesn't see play. There's the Grixis one that... How often are we actually casting Nickel Balls these days? I haven't seen it happen in 2 years.
Yeah, there's the Timur Sarkin.
Oh, unplayable. Completely unplayable. So I want to go right ahead and say this is the best 3-mana planeswalker for Highlander we've ever seen. But what does that mean?
3-color.
Yeah.
I don't know. Her minus is okay at defending herself, but it...
I mean, minusing is not exactly defending herself, is it?
No. Her plus is...
not defending herself either. So the plus is not always even going to draw you 2 cards.
No. It is interesting that it can target your creatures or their creatures.
Yeah.
So if your opponent's going to swing back and kill her with 2 creatures, you can choose both of them, and then she drew you 2 cards and gained you 5 life for 4 mana.
There's going to be lots of scenarios where you are dropping her, plussing on one of your creatures, and then attacking just with that one creature because you've got Exalted scenario going on. And the plus also hit one of their creatures that you expect to crack back. And so in that scenario, you are drawing 2 cards, and you're playing into the Bant Exalted theme. I think this may be playable in the Exalted deck. It's quite flexible.
Yeah, well, it's she's certainly one of those planeswalkers that doesn't seem to do a great job of keeping herself around, and she doesn't affect the board very much. So if you just have her in a vacuum, she's not going to be very good. But planeswalkers don't usually get cast in a vacuum. There's usually a board state to support them, and she certainly has the potential to draw you a bunch of cards and then turn off your opponent's blockers for a couple turns critically, so...
If you're losing the creature battle but you've got some creature presence, this very possibly swings it back your way. We're coming near to the end of our review here.
So, everyone's first thought when they see Emrakul is, how can we cheat this card into play? How can we benefit from...
Of course, that was my first thought.
I
want a 3/13/13. That sounds great.
I mean, obviously, if you manage to cheat this into play, you have a 13/13. So that's not nothing. But it's not something that's going to win you the game right away.
Right. Without the cast trigger.
Yeah.
It's actually just a Flying Trample Pro instance.
Even if you were to do some kind of like free cast it for free nonsense, there's better things that you could be doing.
But then I consider how many times I've had a 6/7 Tarmogoyf. Only every other time I've had a Tarmogoyf on the battlefield. That's actually really common.
Yeah, no. Obviously Tarmogoyf counts both graveyards.
Sure.
Emrakul only counts yours. But even so,
still,
you have...
With 5 mana off.
5 mana off, this is an 8 mana creature.
For 13/13, Flying Trample Pro instance, you get to mess up their next turn.
And I really think that this could be the top end of a ramp deck. Some ramp decks are just going to have lands and creatures, and they won't want Emrakul, because then they'll actually have to get up to 12 mana to cast her. And...
Right.
That's a bit expensive.
But if your deck has just the right mix of I'm able to get to 8 mana, and I have 5 well-represented card types in my deck, this is super, super strong.
Yeah, getting the protection from instants is really nice, because it means that the next time your opponent... She can't be killed on your turn, and the next time your opponent's going to get the chance to cast a sorcery, you're going to be controlling them.
Exactly. You can waste those sorceries on their creatures.
Yeah. I mean, she gets stuck if your opponent has a Wrath, but not a counterspell to counter their own Wrath with.
Sure.
But she's immune to an awful lot of ways for your opponent to actually kill her.
So, pretty exciting in just the right deck when the stars hit.
Yeah. I really hope I see her on the table sometime, because she's a fairly fair Mindslaver effect.
Yeah, pretty
And
fun.
Those are always fun.
Yeah. So that's our review of the Eldritch Moon.
Yeah, there are some other cards in the set that we haven't talked about. They're functional reprints of cards that already exist. You playing those already, play another copy of those. You don't really need us to talk about those.
No, we tried to stick to what was interesting this time. I hope you enjoyed our opinions and off-the-cuff remarks, and discuss it all on the Canadian Highlander Facebook group.
Yeah, I look forward to hearing your thoughts.
Cheers.
Bye.